Are you a doula wondering what to cover in your prenatal appointments with clients? Well, my name is Victoria and I've got a solution for you. I love using the workbook I created to talk with my clients, and in this video, you are going to watch a portion of a mock prenatal visit I did. And in this section of the video, we are talking about making sure this person has a good provider fit, and then we also move into discussing our family communication plan. So in this example, you're going to see me screen sharing and using the birth doula client workbook that I created. And you're going to see how the workbook just allows me to sort of move on. If the client has a good fit, like in this case, she was really happy with her provider, I don't have to spend tons of time on those pages. It's there if she needs it, but we can move into something that's more relevant for her. In this case, deciding how they're going to communicate updates about the birth. So I hope this video is helpful. If you want to learn more about the birth doula client workbook, you can go to motherwelldoula.com/workbook. And you can also go to motherwelldoula.com/shop to see all the resources we have here at Motherwell. Our goal is to make it easier for you to be a great doula. Thanks for watching.
Cool. So this is like the workbook I sent you via email. And you're 36 weeks, so we kind of will. You've almost concluded a pregnancy.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Congratulations.
we've done most of the pregnancy.
Yeah, and we will sort of talk thinking about provider fit. I'm just kind of curious. I do like to ask everybody this question, and just sort of like, how do you feel you approach things? This kind of helps me know birth planning options, and just again, like, I love just to make sure people love their provider. Where would you say how you approach healthcare? Like, where would you say you fall in a healthcare philosophy with these three categories?
Yeah, and when I say this, I don't mean to be a total pain in the butt, but I definitely see like, merit in all three categories.
Sure, that's
So I
okay.
I am a pretty technology oriented person. I mean,
Okay.
probably like evident in the fact that my initial choice is repeat C-section, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
okay.
so but I definitely also believe in sort of like, thinking about people as multifaceted, they have different values and belief
Mhm.
systems, and like all those should be sort of incorporated into the healthcare decisions that they make.
Okay,
Um, yeah, so I see kind of value in all those things.
cool. So maybe think of it this way too, like, and that's totally fine. Like, if it were a spectrum, right? If I like
Mhm.
lined these three up, sort of like most technology driven to like least technology driven, right? And that humanistic is kind of in the middle. Where would you put your X if you're picturing those three things as like a line or a spectrum?
Yeah, I'd probably put them between the technocratic and humanistic.
Cool. Okay, that's awesome. And what you're 36 weeks in your pregnancy, so
Mhm.
you've had an established relationship with your care provider. Would you say you find your care provider is similar, like in that technocratic humanistic um corner?
Yeah, I think so. So, my care provider, a little bit of background about me. So,
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a healthcare provider myself. I'm a genetic counselor. So I work in a women's health group, and I go to that group as a patient as well. So I
Okay, nice.
so I know my care provider in sort of like more than one context.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
he's like my friend as well. And he's an OBGYN. I would probably put him there too. And one of the things I like most about him, I know obviously he's not someone local to you at all because I live in Connecticut.
Right, yeah. I love to hear that. Like, what do you love about your provider?
Yeah, so many things to love about my provider, but one of the things I like is that, especially since I've seen him, function with other patients as well as me, I know that my provider is really truthful when he says that, like, he's a very patient-centered person.
Yeah.
So, a lot of, especially in our sort of like professional circle, like many people know my provider is doing sort of like controversial things like he does. He's like very supportive of patients doing VBACs. He does breech vaginal delivery. He uses
Whoa.
forceps, which we have a pretty large group. We have about maybe 10 OBs. And I want
Okay.
to say he's one of like two who does, maybe even just the only one who does like the breech vaginal delivery. But then when it comes to me and I'm like, I would like another C-section, he's like, great. Like,
Yeah.
so, I
Awesome.
know that it's really about the patient and supporting what they want. So I'd say he could probably like run that gamut of like all those
All
things. Yeah.
right.
Um, and of course, like, I mean, he is an OBGYN, so he has a lot of like, surgical skills and abilities.
Yeah.
Um, and he doesn't do like out of hospital deliveries just because that's not
Sure.
what his
Right.
job
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
um, I could picture it, but he doesn't at this time. Um,
that's so
um,
cool though.
but yeah, that's one of the things I like best about him is I really feel like he's been so supportive of me. We've worked together in so this will be my second delivery, but is my third pregnancy. I had
Right.
a miscarriage with my first pregnancy.
I'm
And
sorry to
we've
hear.
worked together during all three of those pregnancies, and I have nothing but wonderful things to say about
Yeah.
him.
I'm sorry to hear about your miscarriage.
Thank you.
But I'm so glad he's been a supportive provider. And so you
Mhm.
kind of have a huge benefit then of like knowing this group and trusting them and loving the options, like,
Yeah.
um, that's such a gift. And it sounds like again, like you kind of already done all that reflection of like, I do fit with them and we're good, we're well aligned.
Yep.
And two, telling me your history but about being a genetic counselor, that makes a lot of sense. You're sort of like humanistic, technocratic leaning because you've seen technology kind of save and help people. And
Yep.
I'm sure you do some work with like IVF, reproductive technology. So
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense that that's kind of where you're coming at it. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about getting to think about what your, healthcare philosophy is, and then kind of it's figuring out how is that aligned with provider because there's no right or wrong. There's
Mhm.
benefits to each of those three models. Dr. Robbie Davis Floyd, um, introduces. There's drawbacks, and I think the biggest point is just knowing where am I, where's my provider, are we
Mhm.
working together? And it sounds like you definitely are, which is like
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, Cool. Yeah. In addition to that, I'm curious then who other attendants, so like in addition to a provider, who else are you planning to be with you at birth? Like in this planned C-section?
Yeah, really just the only person that I'm sort of bringing in, so to speak, would be my husband. So he's of course going to be with me, and then I know, we're going to have sort of our like team who I'll probably meet that day of like our nurse and our nurse anesthetist, their anesthesiologist, whoever's
Right.
there. They're like during my first C-section, I realized like the anesthesia people are actually really important during
Yes.
C-sections because
Yes.
they're at your face and no one else is. Like,
Yes. It's so true.
yeah.
Well, and so if you don't always, sometimes we'll know who's there and sometimes not. I would say these questions, obviously you're not gonna do maybe like a rundown of questions with people, but this is
Mhm.
just your reminder and your permission to say, hey, anybody who's in your birth, you get to decide whether they're a professional person or like a family support person. Um, you get to decide if they fit or not. So
Mhm.
if your vibe is off, with anybody anytime, you can just go back to these questions and say, hey, like I actually don't really feel supported, I don't feel unhindered, or I feel like, with providers sometimes it might be that nurse wasn't really listening to me, or I'm having to repeat
Mhm.
myself a lot, right? Or they're not being responsive to my needs. You can just say, hey, is there someone else I can talk to? Or maybe that's a role for a partner or someone on the team who is supportive. You can always just decide that birth, and then we'll kind of talk more about postpartum, but especially that immediate postpartum, these questions like also apply to people who might come to your
Mhm.
hospital room in postpartum or in the home. Are they is this the big question is this person here to like just kind of see my baby, or are they here to also see me and my partner and take care of our family as a whole?
Mhm.
um but that maybe does lend to, I'm curious, your kind of communication plan. Have you and your did you say husband or partner?
Yeah, he's my
Okay,
husband.
cool.
Yeah.
So you have referred to them correctly. Your husband, have you guys talked about like communication? Does your family expect updates? Do they just kind of like leave you alone? Is that an issue at all for you guys?
Yeah, we should probably talk more about that because I think that's one thing that's definitely going to be different this time. And that was kind of an interesting point last time. Maybe I should give you
Yeah,
a little background on
tell
my
me. Yeah,
first.
this sounds like a good time to hear about your first birth. Yeah.
Yeah, so my first birth, it was with my son David, who's now 4. And I had an elective induction at the end of 39 weeks, which, I had no, it was elective. I had no medical indication for it. And so we went in on And one of the things about communication was I had told my husband, like, "I wish we could just go in and, like, not tell anyone, and then tell people when the baby's born." And he was like, "Brittany, I just don't think that's an option." He's like, "Where are we gonna put our dog during that
Yeah, say
time?" And
pet care usually rats you out, like,
I
"We
was
have
like,
to call
"I get
someone to get
it."
the dog or
Yeah.
the cat." Yeah, it's
And
funny.
then this time I know it would be like care for our son that if I wanted that, like again, that would be like, well, what are we gonna do with him during that time? Um, but the sort of like the communication and the updates were something that at various times kind of annoyed both of us because during my induction, like our family would want updates, and I was just like, I just wish everyone would leave us alone. like, so I think this time it's obviously a little different when you're planning on having a C-section because people are gonna know we're going in that day, and then in a couple hours, it's gonna be like the baby's here. So there's not quite as it's not quite so open-ended of like you don't know how long it's gonna be. You don't know how fast or slow things are gonna progress. Um, but yeah, we should probably make a plan and then set our family's expectations for like, okay, we're going our like date is the 7th. We're gonna go in and like you'll hear from us when he's born. Cool. Or do kind of like maybe a bookend thing of like send them a message like, okay, we're going in, like you'll hear from us in a few hours when the baby's born. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, just so that we're on the same page
Well,
there.
you're kinda, like, already thinking through some of the things I would say, like, it's really a boundary setting, I'll share again. I'm gonna, like,
Yeah.
share if we're, looking at the book together, but obviously, if you're
Mhm,
talking,
mhm.
I'll stop sharing just so we can more clearly see
Sure.
each other's faces. Um, but yeah, you're kind of hitting the nail on the head with, like, it's really all just about the plan, and are you able to stick to it? And I will say, we can, like, I'm sure as we go, we'll hear I definitely wanna hear more. Maybe after we talk about this communication
Mhm.
plan, just initial stuff, I definitely wanna hear your first birth story. Um, but even with a C-section, it's good to know, they might have had a night full of like emergencies. And so their
Mhm.
schedule, right, is thrown off. And so even then, we think sometimes there could be more of an expectation with C-sections. But sometimes it might not be,
Yep.
they might know
Mhm.
you're going in for a 7 a.m. C-section, but the baby may not still be born until like 11 or something, depending on what's
Right.
happening.
Mhm.
So we'll talk more in depth about that here in a second or two. But that's so it's valid, right? Anytime we're going in a hospital, you're entering into a system. And so
Yep.
sometimes the system has its own time
Mhm.
and sometimes it doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means you're waiting. So what's the plan? What's the boundary? The biggest thing I could encourage you and your husband to do is just to be on the same page. So again, maybe go through this page in the workbook together
Mhm.
and answer. There's no right or wrong to these questions, just so you both know what's our plan and we will stick to it. And so
Mhm.
another thing is that very often people who love us, right, might be messaging like, "Hey girl, how's it going? Just thinking about you.
Right,
Any baby
right.
yet?" And you can, no matter what respond to those things according to your plan. If your plan was, let's say, we are only going to communicate with one person, and then that person can kind of disseminate the information to a group text or something, just so your phone's not blowing up. You can
Mhm.
ignore the other ones. You can literally turn off your phone. You could just say, right, like my husband's phone is the one that's going to be on. I'm only going to text this person till the baby's born, just to let you guys know. Love you. I'll share later.
Mhm.
Or maybe, right, it's a group text. You might make a group text very invalid, but the same thing. Say, hey, if I don't have an update to share, assume it's all good. And
Yep.
you guys need that discipline and to hold your boundary of saying we're gonna turn it off or we're gonna turn it on silent and not look at it. Because I think that can sometimes when I'll joke, but it's not a joke because it's real life. The only fights I ever see in labor or in birth, it's never the like, "You did this to me, I hate you." It's always like, "Oh my gosh, why are you texting your sister? I told you not to tell anybody." It's always that. So have a conversation with what are we doing and just stick to it. You can't control what other people might do or might try to,
Right.
and again, it's usually from a place of love, like they care,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
you have to maintain your own boundary and sort of like, "Nope, I'm not gonna go send this one or two things."
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, don't get stressed if
Yeah,
your phone's
it does.
blowing up and you're like, "I don't have to worry about it because that wasn't in our plan."
Yeah, I think maybe a thing for us to do would be to like put our like to have like a moment like walking into the hospital to be like, okay, let's put our do not
Mhm.
disturbs on. Because I do have some thoughts about like I want us to have our phones to like take pictures and play music. So
Sure,
like
sure.
I want them for those purposes, but, like, your phone blowing up was actually in my first labor, my husband would be like, "You got a text," and I would be like, "I do not care."
Yes, right. See, that's what I mean. The only fight
Do
that
not hand me
happens,
that phone.
it's about the phones. Yes, you're so right. And ignore it. Yeah, like that's a thing for your partner. Talk to your husband and say, "Hey, don't tell me." Like if you put him on do not disturb and you happen to see, right, you can still see the
The
amounts
little
of
bubble,
text you're
yeah.
getting. Yeah, I don't need to know that. You don't need
I
to
don't
tell
need
me
to know,
that. I
yeah.
don't care. Don't respond or only respond to the one person. I really encourage, sometimes that's a great job for like husband, first support person to do, to
Mhm.
be the updater. So you can just focus on like talking to OB, talking to anesthesia, like
Yep,
you
mhm.
preparing to meet your baby, listening to your music, and then they can just worry about that, but you don't need to cross that, like I don't need to know anything that you're doing. It is
Right,
okay.
right,
Um,
yeah.
anything, yeah. So
I think that'll be good. Yeah.